Welcome to Utah Lake Explore More, the official podcast of the Utah Lake Authority. I'm Sam.
And I'm Courtney.
And in this podcast, we'll explore one of Utah's most important natural resources, Utah Lake. We'll talk with recreation experts, community leaders, conservation professionals, and people who know the lake best. In today's episode, we are talking about Utah Lake's number one invader, an environmental villain that completely reshaped our entire ecosystem, the common carp. You probably could have guessed that as I was saying that sentence, right? People know, they think Utah Lake and carp. That's what comes to mind, right?
Yes.
So why don't you kick us off then, Courtney? Get us going on carp today.
Sure. So the common carp, scientific name is Cyprinus carpio. I think I'm saying that right.
I've literally never heard that.
I've never been that good at Latin.
We're going to assume it's correct because I don't know to correct
Yeah,
you.
so we're going to go with that. But they ended up in the lake in the 1880s. They were a really popular and cheap food source in America when they were first brought over from Europe. And when they were shipped to Utah via railroad, they only started with about 200 baby carp, which is really crazy.
Totally
to
crazy
think
that
about,
we got that today from that, right?
Yeah, 100 little fish. Who
Totally.
would have thought? They would
If you
have
want to
ended
hear
up.
more about that, by the way, about how carp got here, I think it was in one of our first episodes.
Yes.
We'll put that on here or something for you guys. You should go check out that episode because it's kind of crazy. They'd come by train. People would get a discounted train ticket if they would help. It was a pretty crazy story.
Yeah, it's wild. So yeah, we started with 200 carp, and the population now is exceeding 3 million. So it's somewhere between 3 and 4 million. Yeah, and that's the number after we've done a lot of conservation and a lot of removals.
Yeah.
So they're really prevalent.
True.
These fish are hardy, you
And
know?
despite all those efforts, which we'll talk about in a minute, part of why there's so many carp is that, unfortunately, Utah Lake is a great fit for them,
Yes,
right?
yes.
I mean, it's ideal habitat. It's shallow, it's warm, it's perfect for benthic feeders like carp, which I'm going to have to stop and turn to you on that word, benthic feeders. You want to highlight on that one?
Feeders are basically, they're just bottom feeders. So the
Oh,
benthic
okay.
zone is that, like, the same thing as like the ocean floor, the lake floor,
Gotcha.
benthic.
Look at that. We're teaching listeners, and I'm even learning while we're doing it.
Yep.
Thanks. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
So the lake is great environment for it, right? They also have really high reproduction. A female carp can lay up to 1 million eggs. That's crazy, right? Like to
even
think about the
imagine.
numbers of 1 to 1 million ratio, right? People think rabbits reproduce a lot. These things are like way worse than rabbits.
I wonder how much they knew about that when they first introduced carp.
Oh man,
If they were
only.
expecting those 200 to turn into millions.
It's probably why they're like, we don't need
Yeah,
more
or
than
they-
200.
yeah,
That's all
yeah.
we need.
Maybe that was like an
crazy.
advantage in their minds.
Yeah,
Being like,
it's
oh,
true.
they're just going to reproduce.
Yeah.
They'll never run out.
And part of carp and like how many to create too, what's crazy is that because Utah Lake is shallow, that's perfect habitat for them, right? They love shallow areas for spawning. We get comments all the time on social media of people seeing the masses of carp spawning and splashing up on the shoreline, right? It's kind of crazy how well they fit together, unfortunately. And also, we have a lack of predators at Utah Lake. There's no top-down strategies in the ecosystem to keep them in check. That's not really something that exists at Utah
Exactly.
Lake, so we struggle with that.
And so for all these reasons, carp are an invasive species. An invasive species is any non-native species that causes harm to the environment, economy, or human, animal, or plant health. So they cause damage to the environment, essentially. And once carp were introduced to the lake, the entire ecology of Utah Lake began to shift. And there's countless ecological impacts towards the lake because of the carp. The first one is they destroyed the natural vegetation.
Yeah.
So as benthic feeders, carp they filter through and churn up sediment. That's how they feed. They churn up that sediment at the bottom of the lake. And while they do that, they often dislodge the native plants.
So this is critical. I don't know if you
Yeah.
realize this. Like we talked about this a little bit, I think, in one of the history episodes. But there was actually a research project done as a part of the Utah Lake Water Quality Study, which was a study that's almost done after a few years, but still working on it, from the state, all about harmful algae blooms and what caused them, how we can control it, the different impacts. One of the research projects they did was doing core samples to look at what did Utah Lake look like 200 years ago. And from that was a professor out of the Utah State University. Because I want to mention this. This is important because people can hear you and I talking and just be like, man, I don't know what they're talking about, right? Or they're just saying that. No, there's literally a research project that shows in those core samples the time frame of when carp were introduced, that it drastically shifted the entire ecosystem of the lake, right? We had a lot of underwater vegetation. It was a very different habitat at the lake. They introduced carp and suddenly we switched completely over to algae.
Yeah.
Because as you just said, they're uprooting that vegetation. They're ruining that habitat on the lake bed.
Totally.
So we've confirmed that with actual research showing carp is one of the most detrimental things that has happened to Utah Lake.
Yeah, and as those plants disappear as well, those aquatic plants, they're a really important habitat for native fish, like the June sucker.
Yeah.
That's the hiding place that those baby suckers will use in order to survive. And without those plants, it leaves them very vulnerable to predators.
I've often heard the lower Provo River channel before they created the Provo River Delta project. Amazing project. You should totally check it out.
Yes.
Before that, I heard a lot of people refer to the Provo River channel as a bathtub, because literally it's just water going down this channel and there's nowhere to hide. So it's like the equivalent of throwing your fish in a bathtub and having somewhere for them to hide. It just doesn't exist. And most of the lake has been like that for a long time until some of the restoration efforts are happening now.
Yeah, and that's the main reason that the June suckers have been outcompeted by the carp, is because the carp are ruining their habitat.
Yeah.
They no longer have that safe area to spawn and for the young to grow. So yeah, it's a big issue. Another issue is water quality. It ties right into those plants.
Yeah.
So as those natural plants are removed, it causes a lot of loose sediment. That sediment is now able to just float freely. There's nothing holding it down on the ground. And this causes that cloudy appearance in the lake that we've talked about, but it can also make photosynthesis just very difficult. All of that sediment in the lake, it can make it just a lot less sunlight be able to filter through.
Yeah, it interferes with it.
Yeah, totally. And that's just one of the reasons. Carp, their rooting behaviors, those benthic feeding behaviors, they also release the nitrogen and phosphorus that have been stored in that sediment. And as all those nutrients are just released back into the water column. And those natural fertilizers, like we talked about in our HABs episode, those fuel algae growth, and they can intensify those harmful algae blooms. Yeah, and then I talked about the impact on native June suckers as well. And yeah, those June sucker fry are, because of carp, they are exposed and left vulnerable to their predators like the white bass and the walleye. So,
Sure.
Yeah.
I appreciate that I got given the fun topic, which is removal, right? Because we're talking about all these negative impacts of carp, that they're an invasive species, they're affecting water quality, they're affecting the vegetation, crowding out other fish species. Everybody always asks, what are we doing about it, right? What are we doing about carp? So there's been several methods attempted, and this is primarily thanks to the June Sucker Recovery Implementation Program. That's an independent program that has, I think it's 13 different federal, state, and local governments on it, solely around how to help the June sucker recover, right? So they've been a leading group at Utah Lake for decades now, much longer than the authorities existed, and they're a great partner. Back in the beginning, when they first started really investigating what to do about carp, they looked at all kinds of solutions. I've talked with some of the employees that worked back at that time, and when I say back at that time, I'm talking about the 1980s and 1990s. This is forever ago. Some people listening to this episode weren't even born when that happened, right? Including some of the people in this room may not have been born. Point being, long time ago, they looked at all these solutions. They tried to figure out what would work best. And what they settled on for Utah Lake and the tools available, the budget available, what worked was doing what's called commercial removal. Commercial seining is a word you'll hear. Seining is another word for nets. So a little bit about removal. They started in 2009, and they removed, the goal was an intensive period of 10 years removal, with a goal of reducing the population by around 75%. Some of the research at the time showed that if they could get the population that low and keep it that low, that was low enough, because it's difficult to completely get rid of a fish species, right?
Oh, totally.
That was low enough to start seeing the positive impacts of reintroduction of habitat, other fish species increasing, et cetera.
Yeah.
So in that 10-year period, they removed over 30 million pounds of carp.
It's unbelievable.
It's kind of crazy. I wish we had the statistic, but there was a statistic they talked about. It was some insane number of the equivalent weight of an insane number of blue whales for trying to grasp just how much 30 million pounds is, right?
Like multiple
it's insane.
blue whales worth.
Oh yeah, it's totally insane.
Crazy.
So that was a reduction of almost 75% when they hit that goal. Things have bumped up and down a little bit in the remaining years since they stopped that intensive removal effort, but they had some great success. So that first effort was carp seining, right? They basically had a commercial company that had fished on the lake for a few generations come out, and they basically went out almost every day all year round and tried to trap carp and harvest them with nets. They'd take them into trailers and take them off to another location. Most of the time that location is the landfill. It helps speed along decomposition, but it's been used for other things over the years. I think there was a mink farmer maybe that took some for feed sometimes. There was a dairy farm that mixed it with the cow manure for fertilizer, etc. A variety of uses. So seining finished in 2018 to 2020 is kind of when it wrapped up. And as a result, they had to look at a different method, what worked well. Because the problem was they did so well, they basically fished themselves out of a job. The nets weren't catching carp anymore. It wasn't productive. It wasn't working as well, which is a good problem to have, right? That means we cut the population by a lot.
Problem.
But things still had to maintain, right? It's kind of like dandelions in your lawn. You can treat for dandelions and kill them all off. Yay, win. But they can come back if you don't stay on.
They're laying 1 million eggs.
Oh yeah,
at
right.
once.
1 to 1 million ratio. They can come back quickly.
Yeah, easily.
So the next effort that they've tried is what are called carp traps, or basically what this works is imagine a circle in the ground, a series of poles in the ground with a net that drops down, hangs on the lake bed, which is then baited and trapped, and they can trigger it remotely. So they basically set up almost like a raccoon trap, if you will, right? Or a rat trap, where it's an enclosure with bait that is triggered so that it's less labor intensive to try and catch the carp. So they've been trying that. I think this is the 3rd summer, if I remember correctly. Yep. They're working with a professor at the University of Minnesota that worked really hard on these and helped kind of develop the idea. And they've had good success. If I remember correctly, I think last year they took out just over 100,000 pounds with these carp traps in a year.
Wow.
So that's really cool to see. They still had that. It's not the 3 million plus a year that they were taking out with commercial seining, but it's a good start and it's a good technology to supplement that effort.
Yeah, especially with that decreased carp population.
Totally, not as much as need to be taken out, right?
Exactly.
Now the carp traps are not going to be enough. There's other methods we have to look at. The state has been evaluating reintroducing carp seining potentially. There's other methods that could be tested. There's other technologies that exist now that didn't back in the 2000s when they started. Another method is using tournaments, using anglers who want to participate, who want to go after these fish, right? So there's a couple of independent tournaments that have cropped up, but in particular, our agency started the Great Carp Hunt, right? And 2025 was our first year. 2026 now, we're actually about to wrap up. In fact, by the time this podcast episode is published, we may have had our final tournament of the season. But basically, we're using this tournament as a way to help remove carp, to educate people about carp, and to help people just have a good experience fishing at the lake, right?
This is fun.
So in our 2nd year, we've done this as a bounty program. So it's not bounty free for all like coyotes or something in Utah, but at the tournaments, we ran 6 tournaments total. And at each tournament, it's a Saturday every other week. You come in and for that day, you go out and catch as many fish as you can, and you're paid a bounty for every fish you collect. So I have some of the most recent statistics from our first June tournament. And so far we've removed over 5,000 carp, which if I remember correctly, is approaching double the number we took out last year.
I think you're right.
Last year we finished the season, I forget the number of fish, but it was just over 27,000 pounds. And I think we're either approaching 50,000 or broke 50,000 pounds already this year. In bounty payouts and the raffle prize that we're doing with it too, it's just over almost $22,000 in prizes. Our top boating team, for example, has taken out over 700 carp just by themselves. So it's a great way not only to help lower carp numbers, but also an educational opportunity to raise awareness about carp, teach people about it, and help them get out on the lake and have fun with it.
Yeah. Just a side note, I was there a couple weeks ago, and one team brought in almost 300 fish at once. And they get $3 per fish.
Yeah.
So that's a good chunk of money.
They're making money, right? And they're having fun with it too.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So a quick recap on this. Despite carp still being abundant in the lake, numbers are dropping, right? We're seeing positive effects. I actually talk with a lot of sailors, for instance, who've been on the lake for many years, who say that the lake seems clearer already, that they can see deeper into the water than they used to be able to. So that's great to hear, right? June sucker populations are increasing. For reference, I think in the 1990s, when it was listed on the Endangered Species Act, there was an estimated only 300 adult June suckers left in Utah Lake. And this is the only water body you can find them. Now, I think the estimate for spawning last year was in the mid-tens of thousands. It was like 30 or 50,000 adult suckers were estimated.
Wow.
So it's great to see that fish species and others, right? Catfish has rebounded, white bass has grown, walleye, we've seen a lot of population growth in other fish. And native vegetation is being restored in the lake bottom, right? We haven't had a concerted planting effort to try and reintroduce underwater vegetation yet, because we're not there yet.
The issue is, like, you can't even start that when there's so many
Oh
carp.
yeah, they just would take it back up, right?
The carp just rip them right out.
Yeah. So we don't want to try and invest money in that until we're a little further down in population of carp. But naturally occurring vegetation has begun to show. We've heard reports from anglers, from scientists out on the lake that they are seeing underwater vegetation. So that's super cool. Last but not least, and then I promise I'm going to leave you guys with the end of this here. We talked a lot about carp today, is what can you do, right? That's something we'd like to try and include these episodes for you as listeners to learn. What do you do from this? What's our call to action for you, right? First off, this is a good one I'm sure Division of Wildlife Resources would appreciate. never release any non-native fish species or animals into the environment, right? I still remember being a kid. I'm
yes.
pretty sure, I don't know if there's a statute of limitations on this, but I'm pretty sure my sisters let their bunnies go in the park at some point, right? People do that, but they
Yeah.
don't think about the ramifications
BYU
of
Duck
it.
Pond is, they've
Oh,
got
yeah.
those
They're-
big white ducks in there.
Totally. There was a pond, I think it's Spanish Fork, maybe 5 years ago or so. The state had to end up restarting the fish population because people kept leaving their goldfish in the pond. And so it caused all kinds of issues. So please don't take non-native animals out into the wild and leave them there. Another thing, participate in our carp hunts. If you have interest, if you listen to this episode and we haven't finished it yet, come join us, but check out next year too. We want to make it an annual event. And there's other fishing tournaments where you can help with that too. Last but not least, something that always applies at Utah Lake and anywhere out in Mother Nature
Anytime
is...
you're in natural space.
Yeah, anywhere. Maintain that beautiful space by practicing leave no trace principles, right? That is a struggle we have at Utah Lake, is that recreation users, whether you're boaters or anglers or trail users, we leave garbage behind, right? It happens. And so taking your garbage back out with you, if you have time and garbage, take it back out with you, even if it isn't yours, to help keep the shoreline clean and protect these species as well. Last but not least, I forgot at the beginning of the episode, we didn't talk about the fact that we're wearing matching Utah Lake fish shirts. If you guys like these shirts, we're trying to figure out ways to get them out to the public, so you should totally leave a comment if you want a Utah Lake fish shirt. It does not have a carp on here because it's not worthy, in my opinion.
Because we don't like carp.
Yes, we don't like that, but you've got the June sucker, and we've got bass, and all kinds of fish on here. By all means, check out the cool shirts.
Yes, we love them. Well, thank you for joining us for this episode of Utah Lake Explore More. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe and follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Utah Lake, and subscribe to our YouTube. And until next time, get outside, explore more, and we'll see you at the lake.